started because we have a lot to cover in our time together. So we have from 11 to 12:15. So I'm glad they gave us that extra 15 minutes this year. So that's great. A little bit of buffer sometimes for Q&A and all that. But so I'm hoping that there'll be plenty of time at the end to really hear everybody's individual context with this topic and have some people to interact with. So I'll just introduce myself, and then I'll have some other people to introduce as well. But I'm Karen Maurer. I'm representing the EFCA Disability and Special Needs Ministry team, and been with this team for about 1.5 years now, and just very excited about what this team is trying to do. It's a relatively new initiative in our denomination, and I'll get to our mission statement in a minute here. But my background, I guess, interest in jumping on this team is, first of all, I've been a pastor's wife in our district for been about 30 years now, the last 24 with Grace Church in Viroqua. But I also am a part-time pediatric occupational therapist working in the school system, so see lots of kids with disabilities and those kinds of situations, and just at the same time growing and seeing more and more needs in our church context, particularly in the area of what's called invisible disabilities, and we'll be talking about that, and the difficulties that those people have accessing our church culture and therefore the gospel. So really my role as an OT, as a profession, is that my job is to help people to be able to access whatever occupations they need to in the course of their day. So in school, it's a school environment, and so that might mean either helping to teach a new skill, or it's helping to remove barriers within the classroom setting so that they can access. And for me, that would be like, their motor skills, or their social emotional skills, or also vision perception, other things that can cause barriers for people to be able to participate in their peers and all that. So the idea of like, wow, now I can use that lens to the church culture and see, is there any way we can be looking at this differently to help more people access our church culture and therefore the gospel? So little introduction to my interests. I feel like I'm just a sojourner along with you guys. I'm learning more about this. I've just been studying a lot about it, trying to learn a lot from other churches and what they're doing, trying to get better at our own church and what they're doing. So a little bit of background there. But Christina Abbey is also with us. She is the Children's Ministries Director at Door Creek, and they're doing an amazing job there. So she's going to share towards the latter half of the presentation on how they are doing things at their church. So I'm going to kind of go through a lot of content here because I have some videos I want to show you. I just want to give you a vision of what other people are doing. Try to touch on a lot of areas, so hopefully we'll hit the context that you're in. And then again, just be ready for trying to leave that margin space at the end for the Q&A and connect with where you guys are at. So getting started here, this is a mission statement for our ministry. So the Evangelical Free Church has a mission to honor God by multiplying transformational churches among all people. As the EFCA Disability and Special Needs Ministry team, we believe that the gospel of Jesus Christ and the family of God are open to all, regardless of any person's characteristics, background, or ability. And more than simple openness, we believe that each member brings value to the body of Christ with their unique gifting, their perspective, their influence on others, and the simple fact that they are a beloved child of the Father. So I'm assuming that every person in this room is already passionate about that mission, so this is going to be just a great time to share together and that, and to build on what I'm sure you guys are already doing. So we're going to start with a little bit of, I'm just calling it a vision video, and the Door Creek Church put this together for me, led by Irina Spiegelman. Am I saying that right? Her last name. She's the director of guest ministry.
Basically, yes.
For the church. And I was just kind of checking around with some churches. Hey, does anybody have an example of somebody with a disability serving in ministry that would be either willing to come as a part of a panel here or do a little video for me? And she thought right away of this Jeffrey that you're going to meet here, and a way that he is serving. So we're going to use this short little video clip as sort of a vision of what we want to achieve in our churches and talk about it. So
Jeffrey Carter. And Peter. Yeah, Green's good. I have anxiety, and I was diagnosed with leukemia when I was 3 years old. And in 2020, I got pneumonia to my lungs, and I had Down syndrome, or special needs. When I was greeting, me and John.
Jeff
Jeffrey has this infectious personality. We'll get together in a leader huddle ahead of time. Jeffrey will go around that huddle and he'll greet each of the individual leaders, and it just kind of gets us started for the day. And then Jeffrey and I will go outside and we'll actually greet the people that are coming in.
That's great, great people. Even babies too. I love babies, you know. Love greeting. I love to see people yawning. I don't like it, I love it. Drink every Sunday morning.
I think Door Creek allowing Jeffrey and myself to be part of the greeter program just shows that it's a place for all people. It doesn't matter our backgrounds. God loves us all. God created us all in his image. He calls us to service.
My dream is to tell people about God. That's my dream. That's my dream. My name is Jeff Carter. I'm a greeter. I love pizza. Cheese pizza. Love cheese pizza.
Don't put any pepperoni on it.
Cheese pizza.
Isn't that amazing too?
That's awesome.
My husband and I watched this at least 10 times, and I was telling these guys, I shared this video with other people on my team, and already this video is going out. Some lady's doing a presentation at Moody Bibles Institute, she's gonna share it there. Somebody else is sharing it at the Midwest District. So I'm like, Jeffrey's ministry is being multiplied already. So what did you guys like about it? Give me some specifics. What captures just something really great in there about special needs ministry?
That he was a greeter just like everyone else. That he had the opportunity to, it wasn't like he was in his own separate little thing. He's a greeter just like the rest of the greeters.
Yeah.
He had an opportunity to do that.
Yep, just one of the team.
Yes,
So, yeah,
absolutely.
which is what this is all about, so. Any other lines that you liked, or?
I think it showed that the church valued him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And he valued the church. He loved it. What do you say? I love it. No, he loves babies.
And
And the
he
church,
loved
and
Jesus,
pizza,
so.
church, yeah. So, what else, what was his passion? What does he live for? Did you catch that line? What is he most excited about?
Telling people about God.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, isn't that what we want for every single member of our church that comes in our doors, to get to that point in their discipleship, that they not only love God, but they're all the way to the proclaiming phase, and he can do that in his role. You know, would anybody have envisioned that for his life when he was little? So that's cool. And how about the mentor role there?
That was beautiful.
Yeah, so that took that one-on-one buddy, somebody mentoring, getting to know him, knows him well enough, he knows what he wants in his pizza, and just everything involved with that in discipleship too. So anyway, there's just, you can just keep.
He couldn't have done it alone, really.
Right, yeah, so, and if we had time, we'd love to hear his whole story. What did this look like from you from the beginning? How did you first start coming to church? Did you grow up in the church? Who mentored you? How did you come to believe that you could have this ministry? And there's a lot of pieces we can unpack, but I'm just gonna leave that there for now and call that our vision video and where we're heading today, because that's what we want for every person that comes in our church, no matter their ability levels, to discover their giftedness. And I think a verse that fits in really well with this is Ephesians 4, where it talks about Jesus Christ as the head, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly as it's intended to, right, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. I think that just captures what that video is all about. But as we know, that whole process doesn't happen, seamlessly for every person in all of our churches. There are many sad stories that don't have that kind of ending, so that's what we're talking about today. I really like this quote that I heard that says that the greatest barrier that people with disabilities have in coming to church is not inaccessible buildings, but rather inaccessible hearts. And does that resonate with anybody, these experiences you've had or seen? I've been there before. I think even though I have this training as an occupational therapist for many years, there's been things I haven't understood and have judged wrongly about people before, behaviors and such. So I'm growing in this journey too. But this is a very helpful graphic, and maybe some of you have seen this one before. It's been on our Facebook page. It goes around a lot, but this shows us the 5 stages of changing attitudes about disability. And I think you can really apply this to our churches. So most of us start from a position of ignorance. We don't know, and what we don't know, often we don't try to know either. So I have a friend of mine who's been ministry leader in our district, years ago. And even she would say, I don't tend to approach people that feel that different from me when I don't understand. My natural tendency on the Sunday morning is to go to people that I feel I can relate with. So she even just readily admitted that that's where a lot of people are. But then we might move to that pity stage. Maybe we are finally noticing some people with disability, but we're still, it's sort of a little bit of a look down on, feel sorry for, but not really have a plan for, that kind of thing. Then we move hopefully to the caring stage. Hey, I am starting to see some needs and understand. I'm not only seeing the person with a disability, maybe I'm starting to see the family around them, people that are impacted, and with our biblical worldview and hopefully our Jesus-filled hearts, we're starting to want to find some ways to care and get educated about that. But then hopefully we're actually moving to friendship. This isn't somebody just to sort of me and them. We can actually be friends with people who live and function differently from us. And then to finally that co-laborer stage where Jeffrey's at. So we're not just like a different than, we are together as one united body of Christ. And so that's the goal. But again, this process doesn't happen automatically. And so what we're going to talk about today are the barriers, what keeps us from getting there, and how to evaluate in our own churches and our individual ministry spaces, how to look and try to identify what these barriers might be, and then just some questions to ask on how we can have that lens to start problem solving and think how we can remove those barriers. So I'm going to play a quick Johnny and Friends video to introduce this topic, and I want to show this mostly to let you know about that ministry website. So the Johnny and Friends has a ministry podcast. It's excellent. I listen to that a lot. But on their webpage, they have a lot of short training videos that your church can use, and sometimes you might just even want to pull up a 2-minute one in some of your meetings and show this. There's lots of them. We're going to have a 5-minute opening discussion at our planning meeting just to make sure that we're thinking about these disability topics or whatever. We could do a more extensive training. They have an excellent 3-part autism one that I saw recently that you could watch with your whole group. I think it would take you 15 minutes maybe to watch the whole thing. It's excellent. So, but just an intro to what those are like. Show this one.
Here at Johnny and Friends, we believe that Christ is the only hope for the world, and that the church, as a body of Christ, has been given a common mission to go and make disciples of all nations.
Throughout his ministry, Jesus made it clear that this included sinners and tax collectors, Roman centurions and Jewish Pharisees, people with disease, and people with disabilities.
Early missionaries like Paul carried the gospel far and wide across the Roman Empire, and no barrier, not even the threat of persecution or martyrdom, could stand in the way of the gospel's advance.
But in our churches today, we have, without even realizing it, created barriers that keep people with disabilities from the gospel.
How do we ensure that we're ready to welcome anyone into our communities? The child with autism, the woman with intellectual disabilities, the man who's lost use of his arms and legs? Or how do you encourage the expectant mother who's learning she's carrying a child with a life-altering genetic defect?
Cliche answers and platitudes won't do. Our churches must reflect in word and action the reality that everyone is created in the image of God, that Christ died once for all, and that each of us has value to contribute in the body of Christ.
Being an accessible church means far more than making buildings accessible. As Sam Alberry puts it, people don't enter a church, the church enters a building.
When we include people with disabilities in our communities, we are reflecting something that is already a reality. Christ died for everyone. Everyone who knows Christ needs to find their place in the body of Christ. Without them, the church is incomplete.
We're not going above and beyond the call of the Great Commission. We're fulfilling it more completely. When we make room in our churches for those on the outskirts of society, we are filling God's house.
You're not alone on this journey, and it's our prayer that the Johnny and Friends Church Training Resources will encourage and equip you for every good work that God has planned for you.
It was very well done, very helpful, many different topics to address. So what we're going to do today is brainstorm a little bit together what I think are maybe 4 things that our churches generally do. I think almost everything that we do as churches can fit under these 4 categories, roughly. So so thinking about worship, all together, so that would be, when I said that, I just mean like the praise and prayer times of our services, our small groups together, whatever, so that might be one category we can think of, where do we have barriers in those environments. The teaching of God's word, so any way that people are having difficulty accessing that, so in sermons, Bible studies, small groups, whatever that might look like, children's ministries. And then fellowship, obviously, is a huge priority of what our churches are trying to do. We're trying to create opportunities for relationships and connection with one another, and everything that involves, the whole pattern of Christian growth that's dependent on relationships with believers. And then finally, service. So this is being able for everybody to have their place in the body of Christ, to serve within the church, but also being on mission together outside the church and what that looks like. So maybe you can think of something that doesn't fit in those categories, but I thought that would at least give us enough to consider and talk about. So it can sometimes just be helpful to think in those general categories. And then as we go through these, we want to think about not only people with the visible disabilities that we can see, so those that come in the wheelchairs and the mobility issues, maybe they've got some, hearing aid, vision issues, that maybe it's the real obvious lower level autism kind of things, but also be aware that there's so many people that would like to come to church that have more invisible disabilities, and these would be intellectual, social skills challenges, that like level 1 autism that's harder to see, but it's definitely a barrier for people. Sensory processing challenges is a big one. And then the focusing and other executive function skills difficulties, the ADHD, and things that can really impact a lot of things in our churches, and especially when it comes to serving alongside ministry with people who have those kind of challenges. So with the worship service first, we'll see how our time goes here, but let's get a couple ideas. And if you think about that prayer and praise time in our services, so even just imagine if our churches were all like we witnessed this morning, and our worship time together, our singing and prayer time, anything that you can think of that would be difficult for somebody with a disability to be able to enjoy that experience.
Hard to see.
Hard to see with the lights,
Depending on where
okay,
you
the dim lights, okay, sure, yeah. And that can go both ways. So some people, the low vision is gonna be hard, and somebody else with the real, a lot of our sensory processing kids would struggle more in this room. These lights are very difficult for somebody like that. You see in schools, a lot of teachers put those blue plastic things above to try to, because fluorescent lights are really hard. So yeah, take into account, what is this like visually for different people? Anything else?
Navigating the aisles, and it could be hard to see because people are standing like during the worship.
Mm-hmm, right, so.
We had that
with
like with our one family in our church.
Yeah, that's really good. So sometimes we only leave place for wheelchairs in the very back of the church too, and we need to leave the front space too, yeah.
Or at least offer it, because some people are not comfortable to sit in the front, just want to be in the back, but at least offer, would you like to? And then be willing to make pathway and remove some chairs quickly, because you want to have the width of the aisles still.
Right, yeah, so all that stuff, very good. Anything else about that?
Sound levels.
Sound levels, yeah, could be too much, yeah, so we'll talk about accommodations for that, but sometimes just that loud sound, so.
Or just the number of people in the room.
Crowds are very hard for people, yeah,
Or the expectation that they sit still and quiet
yes,
for
yes, for
half
sure.
an hour,
Yes.
45 minutes of a message.
And everybody's supposed to be quiet during prayer time, right? And what if you're not, we have certain disabilities that make that hard. So yeah, I think you guys hit on all the big ones there, and we'll get into how to remove some of those barriers. So, well, even entering the church building in the first place to get into the church, there's a whole other realm of things that can be challenging about that. Speaking of crowds, I know we're hopefully gonna be having a new building at some point. We're vision casting about that in our church, but like our foyer is unbelievable. It is so crowded and loud, and some of our sensory people, if they're just even brushed up accidentally, it just sends them, it's just a very hard environment to navigate. And right there is just this barrier that we need to figure out a plan for. But anyway, seating issues you guys talked about, hearing and vision challenges, just that everybody needs to be aware of those and what those are, and then sensory issues. I did talk to a senior minister relations person from Johnny and Friends, just picking her brains about some things recently, and she was telling me that she's heard recently that one of the top keywords that people search for in church websites now to see if this will be a good place for their family is either sensory or autism. So people realizing that's just, there's so many churches that don't work for their families, so I thought that was fascinating. Anyway, moving on to fellowship then, what are some barriers for people with disabilities being able to enjoy meaningful fellowship in churches?
I was talking to someone the other day who doesn't want to come to potlucks because they have anxiety issues and they don't want to end up at a table with people they don't know. So that's difficult.
Yeah, exactly. So true. I just feel like more and more aware of that lately, how much our church culture is like, we just, without intending to, we just value extroverts. And they're the ones that rise the ministry. We don't have space for the introverts, the anxiety ones, the autism that really struggle with not knowing intuitively how to do social skills. And there's nothing more stressful than small talk in the foyer or those fellowship meals, and that alone is gonna keep people from not coming. Now I'm just gonna sit at home and do the stream, but they're lonely, because then we assume, well, they don't want the social interactions. They absolutely do. But we have to have a different, really think about that. How can we make that meaningful for them? But yeah, so just like some of the things we already talked about, that distancing from church members. So maybe some of these people with differences come in our doors, but they aren't being approached because they're different. So that can happen. The transportation or mobility issues, getting to things like even some of the midweek events or whatever, we're just not thinking about, are we making a way for people to get there that have those issues? Even things like limited abilities to participate in social activities. It's not just the downtime, but how many of our youth events are dominated by, we're starting off with sporting activity. And I can tell you from the kids I work with in school, I have mostly boys. I'm a caseload specialist that's just dominated by boys. 89% of my caseload every year is boys. And I got the ones with all the coordination issues, and I will tell you their least favorite time of the day is gym class. That separates them from their peers right away, or recess. They can't keep up and blah, blah, blah. They come to church when we start with sports. And right away, they also don't, or can't excel in that. So just something to think about. You guys mentioned some of the other things with the food and all that, the social anxieties, those challenges there. We could go on and on about that. Even the way that people are judged with their social skills. So like a lot of level 1 autism or other autism, they don't, eye contact can be really difficult for them, and so we assume rudeness. Or some of them just speak very, very bluntly, and again, we assume rudeness. Or they struggle with reciprocal communication, and we assume, well, that's narcissism, or whatever. We just, go to that judging before we really understood what's going on and what their style of relating is. So anyway, and then also just caregiver demands. So remembering the people surrounded by disability and how isolated many caregivers are. So we have to provide meaningful fellowship for them as well. Okay, in the area of teaching God's word, so sermon, children's lessons, small groups, what might be some barriers there for everybody being able to understand what's being taught?
Just like the language that's being used is going to be accessible for everybody, but still getting the main concepts, not using like the longest words ever.
Right, yeah,
exactly.
Right, yeah.
Or something, so
Yeah,
that all.
for sure. Yeah. Being aware of that as well.
Attention spans.
Attention span, so true, yeah. A very long sermon sometimes. Don't tell me. Yeah. I think a big one is how much our teaching is dominated by verbal communication, just by default, that's what we do. And so like, we know that preschoolers need a lot of a multi-sensory approach to learning, right? We do the tangibles and the hands-on and the things you can touch and see and feel, but we forget that a lot of adults still need a multi-sensory approach to learn things, or they need to see things in action. I've heard of, for example, a lot of autistic people that have a hard time understanding the abstract qualities of God, and so the more that they can see tangible things, or see visuals, or see an example of a ministry at work in action, or helping the poor or whatever, then they can relate to those kind of visuals much better than just talking in abstract concepts. So that would be one thing. But just like what visuals can we include in all those environments to help make it easier for people? So the abstract concepts, again, the hearing and visual impairments. Like for example, if we have a challenge, let's have everybody read through the Bible in a year. Wouldn't that be great? How many can catch that by next January? Well, we let people know about audiobook versions, or just, and that counts just as much, or other ways to access the scriptures, kind of thing. So serving. would be the other areas. So, you can imagine if all those other areas are barriers for people participating in church culture, they're never gonna get to that area of actually serving in our churches. So I think part of that starts with, us as church leaders not really having a vision of what that could look like, how we could include all people in serving, and then that's a necessary part for them and for us. And we might have these preconceived biases that we've been talking about. So we might say somebody with intellectual disabilities really can't serve, can't learn to serve in a ministry position. We think elderly disabled people have nothing left to offer, on and on the list goes. So we have our own biases. And then also just that a person with a disability themselves might truly not have a vision for how they can serve. They're all consumed with that disability. God couldn't possibly have a plan in this, for his good, where I can serve. So that's just something we need to think about ministering to people in. So another video here, another resource is the Lausanne, I was trying to remember how to say it like lasagna, Lausanne movement. They have a lot of training resources on disability, and they bring out another different sort of point here in just 2-minute clip I'm gonna show you of how to think about these
So the
things.
scripture that comes to mind with that question of how can we encourage people with disabilities to serve in the church is 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 comes to mind, which says, "Praise be the God of comfort, that who comforts us in our suffering, so that we in turn can comfort those with the comfort we've received from Christ." And I would say that's part of my story and why I'm involved in what I'm doing, because I have received a comfort that I then want to share, because it's not like anyone would choose to have certain disabilities or to choose to not have hands, but it is true that that's what my life is. And so the question is, what are you going to do with that? Instead of, I know that some people with disabilities can be very bitter, understandably so, especially if they're in a culture that's very abusive of them and alienating them, to say that you can actually use this to make life not just better for yourself, but for those other in your community.
One of my favorite initiatives right now is people with disabilities in local church and Christian organizational leadership roles. It's a sustainable missions plan for people with disabilities to reach other people with disabilities, particularly their disability, because they understand it, because they speak the same language, and they often come from the same communities. That spells out a missions model. The missions model is that even though some people with disabilities have their own culture, they have their own language, other people with their disability can reach into that culture and evangelize, disciple. And in some disability cultures, they even have their own church.
And I wonder what would happen if the conversation that we're having with pastors, whether you're working in a global organization or a local organization, just included people with disabilities in that conversation. When you're working with pastors and saying, let's reach out to the vulnerable children in our communities, what if you just included people with disabilities in that conversation? How many more millions of children's lives would be affected if we could do that?
So I think, especially when I think about, kids I see in school and all that, a lot of times what we're trying to do is work around the disability or work in spite of the disability, but what we're not usually doing is like celebrating the disability, and I feel like that's something that we can really offer differently in church, because we know that in God's sovereign design, we were all made with a purpose, every part of us. Psalm 139 is just so true. We were fearfully and wonderfully made, before we were born. That design was there right from the beginning, that plan was there. So as churches, I feel like we have an obligation to help our people to discover what is this plan for your disability. So, and so like who's the best modern day example of this? Obviously it'd be like Johnny Erickson Totter, right? So it's not like in spite of, it's because of that disability that she's had this tremendous worldwide ministry that all of us are benefiting from. So can we give that gift to our people, and how do we do that? It's be something the church can do really differently for people. So what we're going to talk about now, moving to the section on how do we remove these barriers, is we're going to try to lump all those things into two main categories of the physical barriers that people encounter and then the social barriers, and talk about just generalities of those ideas and then see how they apply to your context specifically. But another quote that I thought was really helpful from Johnny and Friends is that effective disability ministry is not a thing that we do, but a way of doing things. And so when we think about removing barriers, you don't always have to think about, we need at our church has to add on another ministry, and it's called having a disabilities ministry. That feels overwhelming to a lot of pastors. I can't add another thing. And it would be great if every church had a team, but it's not even necessarily that. It's like, what is our whole church culture? What do we talk about, speak about? How do people feel when they walk in? How does it permeate everything we do? And maybe it would take another team to help people think about that, but it doesn't have to. It can just take, church leaders just regularly staying up to date on these topics and just doing what they can to lead within their ministries and make each part of the church accessible. But so it doesn't have to be super overwhelming. There's so many resources now. But physical barriers, so what do you guys come up with for that? All those things that we talked about that can be physical barrier. Anything come to mind on how we can make people with mobility issues or vision, hearing, things like that? What can we do to make our environments more friendly? People.
Have our eyes open and notice things that would be a difficulty for them, even just like you said, entrances. I know at camp there's like bumps up and
Right,
that should be fixed.
Yeah, so, yeah. I think right away, at the OT, I see this carpet right away. Somebody that walks in with a cane or a walker, you can't do that. You gotta, be able to, lots of uneven surfaces, but.
This might make them crazy too.
Yeah, exactly. So some need to stay awake and others will drive them out of the room, so. Anything else for those physical barriers that come to mind, or things you've tried in your churches?
Well, have alternative spaces, so a space where they can hear the message, but the room isn't as bright, the room it's not as crowded, it's just a quiet place, comfortable seating.
Yeah, exactly. One of your churches have that, an extra sort of space like that. A lot more churches are having now like an actual sensory room, so it is a room and hopefully with a video feed of what's going on, but then they have some sensory supports in there, like different kind of seats or different fidgets or different stress relieving things that they can do, maybe a little swing that can help to have those tools available. And then some churches just simply have a separate room like that stays quiet, but with a video feed you can do that too. That's essentially what we have. But I think all those options are good, but I think a church should first and foremost think about what can we do to make the sanctuary for the person to not have to leave, but they can still feel comfortable there first, and then if that's not workable, that they have a place to go. So for example, one thing we lack in our church right now is enough dead space in our sanctuary, so the people that need to move can go and move, and they can sit in the back and still be quiet, and that's okay. There are some people that just wigglers, they gotta get up and move around. Just having that space, having headphones available, so if that stuff's bothersome, you can do that. But just a few ways that people, maybe families themselves haven't even thought about some of those options, but hey, let's work together as a team. What can we do to make your experience with the group more comfortable? And then if we can't come up with enough supports that way, then we can do the other rooms and go down. But let's first try to not separate people. Can we make it comfortable where we're at?
One of the two things that we did pretty minor was one we got, I don't remember what the name of the tool is, where it'll say the decibel level. And so we gave that to our sound person. And so let's try not to make it louder than this, whatever, I don't know what it is, but a decibel meter. And secondarily, just giving permission, and we do it periodically to say from the front, if you need to get up, if you need to go, we have seats in the foyer where you're still able to see and hear. And people do use it.
Right. That's so good, yeah.
I wanted to mention, so not necessarily like the physical barrier, but just how we talk about things. So again, thinking of that family, they have a daughter in a wheelchair, and so they told us it's how we go during the service. We're gonna go worship, and then we're gonna do message, and so now instead of now we try to say please stand if you're able. Because she said all those years, like, that just really rubbed the wrong way.
Right.
When we say, okay, now we're gonna read God's word, please stand, or we're gonna worship, please stand. Well, she cannot stand, so then that makes her feel bad, and then her mom would always sit with her. So like just even changing our wording sometimes, adding those couple words, like is so powerful, and it makes a huge difference for her.
Yeah, that is so good. Yeah, our worship leaders have been doing that recently too.
I was going to mention too, with that, something that we've been talking about lately too with the physical limitations is just taking a look at our parking lots and how few spots we had One was van accessible for Mary to get her wheelchair out of, because you need extra space when you have that. And then, just making sure that staff aren't taking the closest ones when we're here at like 6 a.m. or whatever, but, you know, just making sure that it's easy to get into the building itself too.
Yeah, we added parking, extra parking, just not only disabled, but we added extra parking for elderly.
Senior, yeah.
Because we have so many, like we have traditional service at 9 o'clock, chapel basically is filled with elderly. And our parking lot of our church is on the hill.
Oh,
So,
right.
and it's really busy now,
That's
so like
true.
oftentimes, especially if you're not there, right, you know, far enough in advance, you park in the back and then you have to walk up that hill.
Oh, yeah.
And it's windy and freezing.
And
cold.
they're
snow comes.
Yeah, they're out of grass and we're
Need
like,
valet parking.
Yeah.
Right.
well,
goodness.
yeah, that's something I don't wanna do.
Well,
Which one would I do?
yeah, so.
But yeah, so just we have like extra parkings for them,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
we're gonna add, I think, for families with young children too.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, one more.
One of the things that I love hearing, and just to maybe enunciate it, we're having the conversations with people in our church about how can we help you?
Yeah.
And that's our starting point.
Right,
And what, you know, and then those conversations evolve over time. But one of the things I'll ask parents sometimes is, how can I help your children succeed? You know, or how can I best reach, you know, your child or the person in your home or whatever? And just asking that question I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
That's helped me be more attuned and sensitive.
Wonderful. That was actually, you guys really hit on pretty much everything here. And my main point, any point is always that, listen, be curious and creative. So we can think that we know what the needs are, but without a lot of asking those questions. And we were talking earlier about, somebody else I was talking to today we were acknowledging how, like, the situations that I can think of where things have worked the best in churches, is when the parent is able to step forward and advocate for what they need, but we all know now that, you know, and so then that alerts church leaders and you work together. But that we know most parents don't do that. They don't know what to say. They don't have a plan. They're afraid of judgment. They're all that. So just like, really, I feel like the burden is still on us to take that first step to create that opening environment, conversations, or whatever. And a part of this, and we'll talk about this later, is but a website. What is on our websites? I would actually really put that up as a #1 priority. Do we have a website that looks disability friendly, that maybe has some questions there's on there that people see, that we are at least seeking information even before you come in the door of how can we serve you? And I was trying to get a hold of it. We do have a resource for that, and I don't have it with me, but if you get on our mailing list, there's email list over there, we can get you some of those resources, as well as on our Facebook page of churches that have good websites that are showing well how to do that. But we need to move along quickly here to the next area, social barriers. And again, the things we've been saying over and over again, consider everybody that's impacted, the family and everybody when we think about the social barriers, the idea of being patient, suspending judgment, and again, listening and being curious. But I want to share one statistic that I think the church needs to be a part of changing, and it's this, that 90% of autistic adults are either underemployed or unemployed, and that's largely due to those social skills challenges. And then likewise, recent stats show that about 1/3 of adults with ADHD are unemployed at any given time. And so I just really feel like the church can be a part of changing this. If people are learning within that disability even how to serve in a meaningful way in a church context, and when that kind of support, wouldn't that make a difference for when they go out into the world and seek employment? I think we could be a part of that process. So we have, some extended family members struggling in the same way in this, and I just feel like had he had a better, experience in some church things, maybe this would have been different. But lots of people I can think like that. So just a vision for all of us. But some specifics about the social skills things, ways that we can help, and think about people on our ministry teams. Probably you're all serving on ministry teams where there are people with at least level 1 autism, ADHD, things that you've had a hard time figuring out, how do I work with this person? So maybe think of some of these things too, but avoiding eye contact if that makes a person comfortable, respecting personal space. Not everybody wants a handshake. Remember, not everybody wants a pat on the back. That's gonna send some people flying. And one-on-one meetings, as much, with a lot of people would benefit from that more. Many of these neurodiverse people really need a very routine schedule. And you might feel like they are very inflexible, but I'm telling you, they will thrive if they can have that consistent routine schedule. Let them have that, help provide that for them. Provide information about any changes that you're gonna make well in advance. People need that. And provide very consistent schedules when you can. One thing we do at church in our church emails, people have in the church email ahead of time what is gonna be in our service for that Sunday, what the songs are gonna be, order service kind of thing. And it's just, for families that need it, you can go over that ahead of time with your children and just know what's coming on a Sunday morning. But anything you can give people advance, sometimes we think, surprise is great, surprise is, it's not. For a lot of our people, surprise is giving an added stress. Very clear, concrete task descriptions and expectations, especially those ADHD people. The clearer we can make it, the more visuals, and they have that task list in front of them to see what needs to happen next, you're gonna help them succeed. So provide those kind of supports. And again, don't assume motives, rather ask. And then finally, I wanted to show a section on what it means to value each person's skill set and encouraging in those areas of strength. There's a great quote from this book. So Jolene Philo is on our team, and she wrote this book and a lot of others. There's samples in our book, Every Child Welcome, and it has a great section in here on children serving in church and how important it is to get them at young ages, thinking about how they can serve, even not having to wait till they're adults. But it says this: one of our greatest tasks as teachers and leaders is to help kids identify their gifts and provide them with an opportunity to use those gifts to serve others. For kids with disabilities, the invitation to serve becomes a surprise. During the week, these children spend time working on their deficits, i.e. at school, and are often left out of special opportunities for leadership and service. Church can and should be different. It should be a place where differences are celebrated as a means of serving the body. So I wanted to throw up a list of some ideas. Some of them came from that book and other places of if you're struggling to think of how to involve people with disabilities in ministry, areas to think of. So we have the greeting example with Jeffrey, and others talking about assisting with coffee, tea, refreshments, helping the tech team, and the PowerPoint, sound people, all those kinds of things. Maybe making bulletin boards, somebody can help with administrative tasks like folding bulletins, organizing mail, a teacher assistant. I know like in our children's church program, we can have teacher assistants as young as 12, and they can come up and we actually, I'll just confess, sometimes still use flannel graph, and they can help put up or take down or whatever. There's things they can do. Greeting cards, writing letters. This idea was in the book and I thought it was so great. A tech day, did I put that at the end? Okay, so I'm thinking of some of these autism teens in our church that are so socially awkward, but they can do technology like crazy. Was one idea in this book that talked about how if you had a tech day in your church where some of the seniors could come that really struggle, they could bring their devices and those teens could sit there and help them out with that. And I thought, that's brilliant. I need that kind of help. So to have, anyway, just think of what are they excelling at and how can they use that to serve in the church. And I put prayer ministry up there too. That would be the example of Paul Miller, who shared this time last year about his daughter Kim with the nonverbal autism that she had for so long, used the device to communicate, and she uses that device to pray for people, punches in the words and it speaks the words, and she sits there in the church foyer and uses that and prays for people. It's the coolest thing ever. But her parents helped mentor her through what that ministry was. So I'm gonna have Christina share in just a minute here about what they're doing with their children's ministries there, but I have just one last video to share. So I wanted you to see a lot of examples of what this one church is doing to make sure that this person could serve in the area of worship, who was legally blind, and how they went through that process.
We have a man who is seeing impaired, and he's mentioned to me that he would like to play on the worship team.
Right there. Ron, how you doing, man? All right, yourself? Good. It's good to get the band back together, man. It is.
He figured probably that's like a long shot. It's really not going to work well. But I said, you know what, let's try it. There's no reason we can't try it.
I'm legally blind, but that means something different for a whole lot of different people. I can't see you, but I can see light if it's bright enough. Hey, Julie, if you really want to be inclusive, you'll get me one of these tuners. I'm Julie has helped me get this set up here. It's just a regular monitor that I've turned sideways, and also I have a foot pedal to move the music along.
This will be the third week in a row now that he's been playing on the worship team. I won't lie, it takes a ton of time to switch all the music over. And I know that there's a piece of him that wants to just say, this is just too much for people. I will just bow out and let it be. But as a worship team, we've all really just come around him and made him know that he's worth being here. And he has an amazing heart for worship. And to be able to just see that, be able to come alive in him, it's just really a beautiful thing of just seeing how that puzzle piece goes together. The other night I heard him say as he was leaving, this is just so great because I feel like I'm finally doing something normal again.
Yeah, that's part of a really long mini documentary on featuring a number of churches that are doing this sort of thing well, but I just wanted to show you that clip. So I forget what they said, anyway, but the idea is we find a way, you know, you don't assume there isn't a way, you stay at it until you find a way, so. With that, let me welcome Christina up just to share about the children's ministry piece specifically and some great things you guys are doing.
You want me up there?
So, yeah, sure.
Otherwise, I can just like speak right here.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
I'm just gonna stay here because it's more comfort. So I've been working with children's ministry since 2001. I came on staff in 2016. My career prior was I was a teacher in Madison Public Schools. I was the mainly first grade teacher. And really my teaching partner and I we were the special ed cluster. They clustered kiddos just for ease of services and things like that. And so it's really difficult to get an IEP for a first grader because you need to show 2 years delay unless you have a medical diagnosis. And so we would have to get very creative. We went through the IEP process a lot with our kids. So kindergarten teachers would know there's something up with this kiddo. We're going to place them in your classroom because we know that you'll have services or you are used to this. So so that's my background. I was able to work with fantastic colleagues like OT, PT, speech and language, social workers, like all of that to just really build our arsenal of different adaptations and modifications that work with kids. So that, then things got shaken up and was asked to come on staff and did not anticipate going into ministry, but here I am. So when we had kids with special needs come through ministry, it just was, thankfully, I had that background. One of the things that we do start with is with a get to know your child form. It just kind of goes through strengths. It goes through any triggers that I need to be aware of. We train our volunteers on just our sensory bins that we have in large group rooms. And then a lot of time, one of the things that it's always kind of fascinated me that how many parents will just that have children with significant needs, just drop them off without saying anything. They kind of drop off and run, and like maybe they won't notice. But thankfully, we have an amazing team of volunteers that really that just buy into, like, this is a church for all people and all kids. And so a lot of times I am just kind of called in, like, hey, can you help figure out? And so if we do have to have a conversation with parents, like you were saying about having a conversation with parents, it's like one of the big barriers that we like to kind of break through is there a phrase or any supports that you use at home or that you know that your child's teacher uses that we could use here? Because we only see your kiddo once a week for 1 hour, and you know, consistency across all environments. So if there is anything that we can do, like I will create whatever visual that your child needs. We've done video social stories, just on welcome, like here's what to anticipate when you come to DCC Kids for the first time. And it walks through a preschool one and what to anticipate, and an elementary one and a preteen one, where kids know where they're going to be, they're gonna see the spaces, they're gonna know that, okay, when we walk into these front doors, there are gonna be a lot of people, and it might be a little busy, but we're gonna go down the stairs and this is what you're gonna see, this is how check-in goes, and then the other thing that we're super mindful of is starting with, as soon as our kids graduate from the nursery, our 2-year-olds through our 5th graders have the same schedule. They have the same routines with a 15-minute playtime and activity time where they're just connecting with peers. And they have a connect time with their teacher in a small group setting. Then they all go to a large group time. They're like, we have pre-K, elementary, and preteen time, so they're not all together, but the structure of our lessons are the same from 2 years old up through 5th grade. So we're mindful of just keeping that routine and predictability, and then creating visuals where that is super easy. But yeah, it's a lot of just, it's very individualized. A lot, if parents are forthcoming about their child's needs and filling out the get to know your child form, a lot of times I'll also ask what IEP goals is your child working on? Are you matching visually? Are you matching colors? Are you working on letter recognition? Because then I can take the monthly memory verse and change, or modify that. Okay, let's just focus on the beginning word. Let's focus on matching the picture with the word. So, yeah, I think that's, and I think the other thing too that, especially this past year, and since COVID, there are a lot of kids that exhibit big behaviors. One of the things we always tell our volunteers is that every behavior is communication. So if there is a meltdown, they're communicating something. If they are talking back to you, or if they run out of the room, they are communicating something to you. And so it's not, don't take this personally, this is not a personal thing. And so one of the things that we've noticed is that sometimes when having a conversation with parents, they don't know what's going on. And sometimes there are kids that are going through some really icky stuff. And so some of our kids that appear to have special needs aren't diagnosed or don't have technically a special need. Like they're not ADHD, or maybe it looks like ADHD, or maybe it looks like sensory processing issues, but it's trauma. And so we are doing this year trauma training, and some of the trauma-informed ministry training just really is a catch-all for a lot of different types of behaviors. So that's through Reach Hurting Kids. It's a great resource. So,
what's it called?
Reach Hurting Kids Institute. It's a little pricey, but their book is $25 on Amazon, and it's fantastic.
What I wanted to mention too, with kids that came out at the spring workshop, was the idea that how important it is to also think outside the box. So there was a couple ministry leaders that came last year that were saying that they were struggling with their own kids. Like, here I am, pastor of the church, but I can't get my own kids go to Awana, and just feeling like a failure about that as a pastor dad or whatever. And so but yet one person shared that they discovered that their autistic child was actually much more comfortable in one of the adult Sunday school classes. And he just needed to be told in that group that that's great. You're fine, just to watch out for that one side. He was benefiting from it, they were benefiting from having it, and that's okay. Because I think a lot of parents feel the stress of if they can't match their child to that environment, like even with all that help and accommodations, that it's okay to let's think outside the box. Is there another plan that could still reach our ultimate goal of not conformity to a church culture, but acceptance and access to the gospel and access to the church community in some way.
And I think too, it's also just an awareness that if a kiddo is playing with Legos, they're still taking in. That they can fidget and appear not to be, or rolling on the floor. Or I have one who goes into the back corner with some soft seating, and he, instead of sitting on it, he builds a little cave for himself. And whenever I ask him, hey, what was the Bible story about? He's able to tell me what a couple things that he heard. So it's just not assuming that they're being naughty or that they're not listening. It's, it's not neat and tidy. Sunday school, like when I was growing up, we all sat at our tables, we were all angelic, there were no problems, but it's different. It's different.
Different somehow though, so. Yeah, so love to hear everybody's contacts, what's at the forefront of your mind for your contacts and what area you'd like to grow in, or we'll start with you.
So I have a few things.
Yeah.
The one most pressing thing, I think actually one of the early slides you mentioned, 5 stages, changing attitudes with disabilities. We have so we're a smaller church, about 106, 120, depending which way the wind blows, but we've got one family, they've adopted 2 disabled children, and they're coming, but they're little. Another family who has 3 disabled, up to their oldest is in their 40s, and she doesn't come to church because it just feels like too much work. And then we have another family, at any rate, with one disabled, he's not disruptive as much anymore, but at any rate, the most pressing, so it's something we need to think about, and we haven't done much with it. I've been senior pastor for about 8 months, so, but I've been in the church for longer than that. One of the things that is probably most pressing is we have a gentleman who's coming, and I'm guessing he's in his 40s, somewhere right around in there, who is developmentally delayed in some way, I'm not totally sure. And he makes a lot of people uncomfortable. He loves kids. And I'm trying to figure out how can I help him and our people, because there's one of the things that didn't help, and I just found out, was that he came out and told a couple of people, yeah, my ex-wife accused me of molesting her children.
Oh my.
And while I don't think there's probably anything to it, it just has, all these red flags are gone up now. And so trying to think how.
You guys done a background check just to know where?
I mean, informally, we've tried to search ourselves. I haven't asked his permission to run a background check. So, and I think we found the allegations and they were thrown out. But, yeah.
Maybe be honest with them and say, that really freaks people out. You have to somehow make them comfortable by not sharing that and sharing with us the whole deal,
Yeah.
Do you have safety and security policies in place for children?
Well, so
For volunteer,
So we're working on that.
Okay.
And so we've been working on that, and so this safety and security, they're coming up and they're reading books they're kind of making them a little freaked out.
Oh, no,
So we're
yeah.
trying to help with that.
Anything.
We don't have children's ministry yet.
Okay.
And so that maybe helps or doesn't help. We're kind of all together, and then we do small groups.
Is it more things he says or what he does as far as proximity with people, or both?
I think a bit of both.
Yeah. So, I don't know, possibly with the physical closeness thing, with somebody that's lower intellectually, it works with people on the spectrum, but the idea that we were mentioning a social story, so like not assuming that he would know better, but then you actually sit back in a one-on-one, and I mean, with some of our little kids in school, we literally go over a personal space social story, and so like when you were at church, the environment, we have to have like hula hoop distance between people, or just find a social story, there's so many online, but that, or even just you can cartoon it with, now what do you think is a good amount of distance? And that can be hard to communicate because everybody else is hugging everybody, so, and so then he's going, why can't I hug? But there might be a way to like, just make sure that he knows, you had that clear teaching of what are acceptable social skills with people that are in your
Especially
family
between
member,
adults
so,
and children,
yeah.
it's
Yeah,
different.
so, right,
Yeah.
yeah, so.
Has he shared his story fully? Like, has anyone sat down to hear? Did,
Yeah,
you know, what?
he did in part with me. I actually have already scheduled to get together with him
Okay.
to hear more and talk more, but give me a question. It's helpful.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, if he had support during school, like, what helped him during his schooling? If, this was a while ago, if he's in his 40s, but, or just who had influenced him in his life and who supported him during his life, that might draw out, they give you some sense, is he on the, like, does he understand that, or is he aware that he's on the spectrum? Is he bipolar? I have a volunteer who's bipolar, and he right away came out and told me, this is what, socially, sometimes I will go on tangents, but, I just want you to know I'm on medication for this, and I have it under control. I feel
pretty self-aware.
So he's very self-aware, so I think drawing out how, his self-awareness and like his regulation, like awareness of self-regulation.
Most likely, I don't know his level of independence, but has he had any counseling in his adult years, and what strategies has he already learned to reinforce that?
Thank you. It's helpful.
And I don't know, do you have someone that, so I also have another at one of our other campuses, she has fairly significant needs, special needs, on the autism spectrum. She's a little bit louder, but she always she has a heart for kids, and especially kids that she's part of the foster program, like she grew up with foster families and things like that, and so she's had a rough background. And so she just has a heart for being with kids, but she's always with a buddy, for me, a very trusted long-term volunteer who I would totally trust it, like redirect her as well. It's sometimes a little bit harder for her because she's managing kids and the adults, but if you ever get to that kind of ministry where they wanted to serve with.
Yeah, that's one of the things I noticed in the video was that there's a buddy.
And they say that, yeah, even at church on the Sunday morning, if you had a rotating team of who's gonna be his sort of companion that day, and, just commit to, I'm going to be with these various things every Sunday morning, and we're gonna have friendship, as we've been talking about, and rotate who that is, and then parents and people around can feel safe that there's somebody to come in interference if they need it, but. So that would cover you too until you're sure that skills are learned and taught, but anyway. But any of you guys have a context you wanna share about you're dealing with your churches, or?
Well, I had a little similar situation. I taught 5th grade for 30 years. So like I had a lot of special needs individuals come in and out of my classroom of all varieties, and experienced all of those things, and went through a lot of different seasons of how we deal with special needs. At one point in Wausau here, we housed all of our severe special needs kids in one building. And it happened to be in my elementary school. So we got, our kids just got used to being around people with special needs, which was really cool, But then they decided, that's not the right way to do things, so we dispersed them all out to the new buildings and whatnot. But, but now I'm pastoring here in worship and young adults. So, we have a few individuals that come to young adults that have some special needs as well, and I'm mentoring an individual who has multiple layers of needs, which is interesting, because it's like, how do you help these people get, plugged in, and how do you help them to learn how to serve, and where's the right places, and what's the right way to do it, and how do you get them to a point of like, okay, they're at a good place to serve, because it's not just automatic. You're not just gonna be like, hey, this is a special needs person, so we need to plug them in right now, because they deserve to serve as well, which is true. But yeah, there needs to be a process as well, you know, and what does that process look like? And how do you determine what's the best place and when's the best time? So there's a lot of layers, and I would say, you know, we have a couple things here, but you know, I don't feel like we do it the best here at Highland. We don't have an actual disabilities ministry per se. So I think we need to work on how do we do it better, you know?
Yeah, I was thinking, Dr. I'm not selling the profession of occupational therapy, and there's things about it, I don't agree with everything that's going on in the professional, but one thing I'm remembering is when it first got its start, was back with, when many more people were institutionalized with mental health illness, and finding that this sitting around all day long was not contributing to people's health. And so this whole field developed of, you know what, if we give people meaningful occupation to do while they're in these institutions, what difference might that make? And sure enough, it brought tremendous healing. And then it just built from there, it built after the world wars and that kind of thing. So that was the foundation of it, but I think about that a lot, you know, what we can do that in our churches. So even these religious, is there anything small we can give them that? I think we're just created for good works, you know, Ephesians 2:10, and so can we help them find what is their good work? And it might be really hard, what is that? But maybe today it's just, I mean, honestly, as far as sensory things, one of the most regulating things for people is heavy work and heavy input. So can you have even that person, can you carry this pile of Bibles from this room to the next where they're gonna need it for that study, or carry something that's gonna actually help organize their sensory system, give them a purposeful thing to do? Can you be the one to wipe off the boards when we're done? Can you be the one, you know, sweep when we're done? But just find something and it's gonna be helpful. So anyway, easier said than done. We just have to think that way all the time. But anybody else have a context you want to share about it? Or
I'll just share my responsibilities here at Highland. And our one is being the pastor of the tradition service, which is on the other end of the building, and so just trying to grow in dealing with people with various disabilities. And I also, for 5 years, actually ever since I started here at Highland, have been involved in the young adults ministry with those on the autism spectrum. And I've learned a lot of what you share just by experience, but seeking to grow in that more. I'm only part-time here, and my other part-time job is as a substitute teacher. And usually when you're a substitute teacher, they say, just call someone else. I still want to know how to deal with various types of learning disabilities. Plus, my wife and I have been foster parents, so that is something that I would love to grow in. Who knows what the Lord would bring to us, the different disabilities and challenges that are there as well.
I want to be sure to mention, we have quarterly webinars that we do. They're usually on a Thursday for the DSM ministry, and they've been a variety of topics, but we're always looking even for more people to share, you know, from their experiences and things like that. But that's a good resource. You can find out about it on our Facebook page or sign up on the email list. But just continually growing our resource list and finding these connections where somebody's already done some great training and your church can access that and pull in those videos. But one thing we did last spring was we had a survey that was out there for churches to use, or anybody that you knew. It was published from January to May for parents of children, neurodiverse children, to be able to answer questions about what has been your experience in churches. And a lot of positive and a lot of negative and hard experiences, but we learned so much from that, collected all those results, and then we had 4 of those people come on live to the webinar to share personally what their how they answered those questions, and then people could interact with that. But those are the kind of things that we do in those webinars, and you know, just bringing different speakers. So, or if you even have something, shoot us an email. I would love to learn more about this topic, and I think this could be useful for our churches. Let us know about that. And then the other thing that we're trying to grow in is having more cohorts. So like I've talked to some people, you know, we just connected with you guys. What can we do within our district to get people more connected within our district? Because then if we want to share resources back and forth, or even have people come and and speak, or are there different churches, and how can this work out? We're just more tightly supported that way. We can share ministries. The Eastern District is really they got a cohort started this fall, but that's another way we're trying to grow as a denomination in that, to support each other, so. Anyway. Any other thoughts from any of your guys' contacts or working on, or good for you?
I think it was really neat, like I'm thinking, looking and reflecting back on Jeffrey's story. But I think it starts with us and our heart change and understanding what it looks like and what you expect out of someone. So could be very different situations, right? Because like you said, obviously disabilities are so different. But oftentimes, like at least for myself, I keep thinking, at least in the initial process, it could create more work for you. Like if you're thinking of it as a task, like, okay, I need somebody to greet, like, you know, to stand and greet, or like we have another gentleman not pictured in their team, the greatest guy, everyone loves him, everyone knows him. He always wants to serve. And you know, once he has your phone, he'll be texting you. So I get a text from him. Hey, do you guys need help this Sunday for the second service? My first, like, my knee-jerk response, like, oh, you know, like, could be like, oh, great, now here he comes. Like, I probably don't, and then maybe, is this gonna make it harder for me? Because now, because he might greet, but he might forget. He might say that he will, and so you're not gonna get necessarily always the same output as you were, but that's not where the value is. I'm a very task-oriented person in general. I'm a type A personality. I want it to be done and tidy with a bow, and it's just not how that works. And so I think God's been really working in my heart just to show me that what is the value of that, like what they bring in, both what they bring into the church family and church family seeing that and that there is a place for them, but also for them as individuals, right? Because there is the desire, like it blesses him so much, and I love, and like you mentioned those stages, right? Like I love him, I love his mom runs our coffee team, like I want to be there for them, so I know it's important to him, so heck yes, I'm gonna get you, yes team, I need it. So now I know he's gonna need a ride because he doesn't drive. Okay, I'm texting my husband, Tim needs a ride, can you guys take him home from church? You know, we live in the same like little town, whatever. But it's like, so it kind of goes that relationship, but then also seeing how it blesses him and just getting to know those people. Like with Jeffrey, like I've known Jeffrey for a couple of years now and his family, but I was present in that interview, right? And I would have never thought, like I've learned so much about him, and because you know, he doesn't always share, he doesn't actually speak a whole lot on Sunday, so when you first reached out to me, I thought, I don't know if I could get a video out of him, and it was a little bit of a process. But he doesn't talk a whole lot, you know, like he'll give you the biggest hugs, but then to know like, okay, that's what his dream is, and it's like how beautiful his heart is, and just to be able to discover that, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's, you know, what he might look like on the outside or how he functions, but he's further along in his faith than anybody else on my team. If I ask them what their dream, I wonder who else would tell me that their dream is to tell people about God. If somebody asks me what my dream is, and I'm paid to do this, you know, like, hello. So I think a lot of it just like for me, it just starts like with that, like why are we doing it? What's the outcome? We're not including them necessarily because we're gonna get the task done and checked off, but because we want them to be part of a church family, we want them to be part of the team, we want them to feel needed, right, and to have those relationships and be body of Christ together. I think we started an adaptability team, what we called in our church, and I think they said something that the church is disabled. The church itself is disabled if it does not include members with disabilities. And I thought, wow, that's like pretty profound, right? So I think a lot of it is just at our heart level and of us, not them, but it's just of everybody else to be aware of it and just love people.
And the sad truth is that there are so many families that don't have a church home, right? Because they don't know where, like on my end, I've gotten several emails and connections from families that like, we haven't been to church in 5 years because my son is autistic and I just don't know where to take him. Like they, you know, I think it's 11% of churches across our country are equipped or able or willing to take people with certain levels of disabilities or, you know, so it's sad.
For sure, so much. We really just touched on so much we could be talking about, but one quote to close us with, and thank you for your time, and we're gonna get to lunch, but, that ties in with all your stories is that, families with disabilities need churches, but churches need families with disabilities. So we just have to, and that's what you guys are learning firsthand, how much, and Jeffrey, look at Jeffrey's nationwide influence already.
I'm gonna tell him, I'm gonna reach out to his
please
parents,
do.
but then when we have that friendship, it's
yeah,
just so cool, and they appreciate it so much, like the families appreciate it so much. When they realize that you actually care about their family
We
members.
love our kids.
Right,
That's such a
and I think
difference.
not just kids, but adults too, because that like is a certain level of burden, because you know, with kids, we are like, oh, the kids are cute, you know, they're little, they're whatever, and now here you have this grown people, and their parents are aging, and I can't imagine like what else is on their mind, right? So, but then to know that they're really truly welcome in our church, and we love seeing them, but, you know, blesses them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gotta get on the